Swerve Strickland has got the keys to the kingdom. He's got the keys to the land of the elite. He is finally the AEW World Champion, and we're going to talk about it in today's episode of WrstlXtra.
Yo, this is WrstlXtra. I'm your boy A Dazzle, the Black Wrestling Advocate, always joined by my trios team, the House of Black Mex, the WrestleManiac, if you will. Yeah, and of course, the omnipresent man that is the Professor Gerard Bonner. Whose house?
Swerve's house.
Swerve Strickland has finally become the AEW World Champion. Swerve defeated Samoa Joe at AEW Dynasty on Sunday and has become the first African-American AEW champion, also to add to the list of accomplishments from this win alone. Swerve also becomes the 11th African-American wrestler to win a major wrestling world championship. And when I say major, we're talking WWE, WCW, AEW, TNA, and NWA. I mean, you can argue the NWA thing, but it's got a history. The NWA might not be the biggest thing right now, but history has a lot to do with it as well. Also, as well, to add on top of that, in terms of AEW, he is only the third person to hold both the World Championship and the AEW World Tag Team Championships. The other two being Hangman Adam Page and Kenny Omega. That is very good company for Swerve to keep. Now, let's get into this whole thing. We've been predicting, we've been saying for weeks upon months that this should have happened and it was destined to happen. Gerard, how did it feel now that it finally happened? How did it feel to see that 1, 2, 3 and Swerve holding that championship above his head?
It's on one hand a sigh of relief. I think one of the things in the wrestling space that we have become accustomed to is we think things should be obvious and we think certain things should happen, but it's never a guarantee it's going to happen until we see the 3 count. And even then, you have to make sure that the show goes off and nobody comes and cashes in or some other foolishness before you can really say, okay, they are the champion. And so I congratulate Swerve Strickland. I feel like this is another one of those moments for Black wrestling fans, for, Black people in the wrestling industry in general, because I think much like most other areas of sport, people are good with us being in certain spaces, but not usually in the top spaces. We can win the mid-card titles, we can do, but there are certain things that they're not so comfortable with. And a company like AEW, who interestingly enough, built an entire brand based on diversity, or at least, speaking of diversity and inclusion. And, you could make arguments that, again, first tag team champion was an African-American in Scorpio Sky. We've seen African-Americans win other championships in AEW, from the TNT to the first TBS champion. We've seen that happen, but the world title is always the title in any wrestling organization, and it's taken a bit longer. So it's exciting to see that Swerve has done this. I am very excited to see what this reign could look like. I'll give my thoughts probably a little bit later, because I'm sure at some point we'll talk about how long do we think this reign's going to be. But right now, I want to just enjoy the fact that it is here and that it is happening. And I really hope that Swerve is given all that he needs to help make this a very memorable run.
Let's talk about the match itself. AEW Dynasty for me was very, very good. Very, very good show. In any way, do you feel as though the match itself kind of was on par with all the other matches? do you think it may have been lost because it was so late? And as much as it was the main event, we felt like we had so much wrestling before that, so much good wrestling.
We did
before that. Do you feel as though the match itself kind of was on par with everything else?
Obviously there was a standout match on that card. That there was the 2024 match of the year happened on that card. And it's one of them ones where, you know, the hard work, the hard miles had been put in by Samoa Joe, by Swerve Strickland before the main event even began. By the time you're seeing the entrances and the pageantry of Swerve's entrance, it's a formality what's going to happen in the ring afterwards. Just give him the title. The match was good, though. The match was good. I think special shout out to Samoa Joe as well, because Samoa Joe is someone that I'll hold my hands up and say, I thought this guy was finished. I thought he was done. And we saw that, particularly that last NXT run, and he signed for AEW. I was thinking, well, what's he really here coming to do apart from maybe some type of kind of consultant role? But, you know, he kind of got back in shape. He got back ready for the ring and real wrestling sort of thing. And he elevated in his position, whether it be hook or by crook or intervening when a certain Mr. Brooks wanted to take off the head of another young boy. Like, he kind of got back himself, and they saw him as a locker room leader. They put the title on him, and this shows as well that short stints are really good and effective. And he proved that, you know, that case, and he put over Swerve here in what was a match that, of course, didn't necessarily live up to Ospreay Danielson, but like, it was never supposed to. No, I don't think anyone required that. I thought we got a really solid main event. I think the crowd are really hot for it still, which is a important factor of it. The crowd done really well, because that would have been a long watch, and how intense some of those matches were. Yeah, I think we got what we needed from both guys. They told a good story. Swerve didn't choke. Swerve overcame eventually, took his time, slayed the monster that is Samoa Joe, and walked out champion. So I was fulfilled from the match that we got, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. As I was saying, you know, it felt as though when we finally got to the main event, I was like, oh yeah, there's still another match. Like, the show just felt so long. And I think it was not just because of how many matches it was, but because of how good it all was as well. It was almost like, so what more have you got to offer us? What else have you got left to give us? There was so much going on. Of course, you mentioned Will Ospreay and Bryan Danielson, and we've said it so many times on here, and we're going to repeat it again. But I'll go with it. Swerve as champion, how long does it last? Who takes it from him? We've mentioned his name 3 or 4 times already in just 8 minutes that we've been on the show. But Gerard, I'll let you take this one.
You know, I think, and we've talked about it, Mex has kind of lined this out months ago, kind of, you know, perhaps a Swerve title run up until All in London, you know, with Ospreay becoming champion. I think this is one of those moments where AEW and Tony Khan have to really kind of rethink this. And I think what will prove whether or not they should extend this run will be what these next couple of months look like for Swerve. You know, one of the tough things is we love the chase, but once you finally arrive, what kind of champion will you be? I maintain, and this probably isn't the show for this, and this is a hot take that we'll probably take up somewhere else. I wasn't all that impressed with MJF's title run. I thought the run to it was great, but you know, his run seemed too long because it was not interesting. So I think the challenge that Swerve's going to have is, you know, with being the first, how do you take all of Swerve and make that something that we want to see as champion for an extended period of time? So if Swerve is able in these next 4 months to make this must-see TV with him as champion, then I think his run should go past All In. You know, if not, you know, Will Ospreay becomes champion. Here's the challenge with Will Ospreay becoming champion, though. Who does he fight that actually looks credible enough to beat him? because given the two matches he's had already on pay-per-view with Takeshita and Bryan Danielson, two of arguably the best in the world, if he's taken them out and taken out everybody else he's battled, who else realistically has a chance? So I think they may have painted themselves already into a corner with Will Ospreay, because if Ospreay is head and shoulders above everybody else, then who ends up fighting him that makes this look reasonable? And so for that reason, a lot's going to really depend on what this Swerve run does in these next 4 months. If it's something that's realistic, that, they show he can beat Ospreay, then you take that and let that run a little bit longer, and maybe let that run to, World's End, and then make the title change there. So I think the answer to that question really does depend on what Swerve does these next 4 months.
Mix, what's your response to that?
It's harsh because we obviously 4 months sounds like something. Like, I mean, I just said Samoa Joe had a good kind of 4-month reign, but at the same time, when you're trying to establish someone at this top level like Swerve, 4 months alone may be a bit detrimental. Like, Joe is already Joe. He's on the, he's in the September of his career. Like, he doesn't need like a long run. The problem doesn't necessarily even lie with Swerve. It's just how much power or infinity stones is Will Ospreay going to absorb, because I watched him at Dynasty, the crowd reactions, I in my podcast this week, I called it, he's the face of AEW. And I hate to say it on the night where Swerve becomes world champion, but Swerve isn't the top guy in this company. It's Will Ospreay. It's head and shoulders. You can clearly see it. It's the energy he gives off. It's the energy the crowd give him back. And I don't want to necessarily blame AEW. Could Swerve have been this particular guy? Maybe if they done this title change a bit earlier, at the heat of it, at the peak of his powers. But right now it's Ospreay, and it's like Ospreay's not gonna lose between here and London. Like Gerard said, who does he even lose to? So it'll be very harsh to kind of take the title off Swerve. I think the best they can do is really give Swerve almost the Ospreay treatment over these next 4 months, so that we're walking into All In a situation like, well, who's gonna win here? Who is gonna win here? Like, it's very difficult. I can't see past Ospreay right now. It almost looks as if it's set in stone. But I think we need to really make sure we're kind of cashing in on Swerve, give him every opportunity to succeed, and then let the crowd kind of decide, who they want to see as that next champion.
I feel as though it's set. Will Ospreay is going to be a champion very soon. How and when it happens, that can be all argued. There's ways it can happen, and all the rest of it. I think for me, what was interesting at the media scrum after the show, when they were asking Swerve about his achievements, how he felt, all the rest of it, one thing that he said is, he loves the fact that obviously he can be part of this list of African-American champions, and he's got his moment and all this kind of thing. But one thing that he said was he's hoping that this isn't like a one-time thing, whereas all the other people we can think of that have won the major world championships, or the African-Americans, apart from The Rock, probably have not won no more than twice. Booker T is another one as well. But then there aren't many that can say they've got, 5 times or 10 times, 17 times, all this kind of stuff. And I think for me, one way to combat possibly a short reign, or his first reign being quite short, or 4 months as we're kind of predicting, is to make sure he then wins it multiple times over time. I think for me, that would probably be the only way it would make sense. We keep Swerve up there with the likes of a Will Ospreay. It helps as well to still, define who he is, or make him a better star in over time. I don't see it going. I don't see it going past All In. It just wouldn't make sense for Swerve versus Ospreay and Swerve winning. That's just me. because of this position that Ospreay is in, the amount of traction he has, just the level of star he is. It just wouldn't make sense if they meet in the ring and Swerve wins. I'd be very, very surprised if that happens.
I mean, I see a world where it can happen. I think perhaps one of the greatest ways you build Swerve is for him to beat Ospreay. True. You know, I mean, in London of all places, you know, I think there'd be so much to be said for that, you know, that it'd be one of those things, because here's the thing. We've not seen in AEW how Ospreay responds to a loss.
True.
And at some point, we're going to have to see that. Now, when that happens, I don't know. But I think that, you know, in terms of telling a story, it's almost like, you know, should Cody have won at 39? The obvious answer now is no. But people then were like, oh, my God, what have we done? You know, but True. What you've done is you built Roman to be that much stronger and put many more obstacles in front of Cody, so that at 40, people were crying. People were in love with wrestling again, like all of these things when that happened. So I think, because my concern right now is, I get, you know, Swerve saying, hey, I need to do this multiple times, but what's really more effective? You know, being a 4 or 5-time champion whose combined reign was 70 days, or being a 1-time champion for 800 days. There's somebody else in that same company who, you know, boasts a number of world championships, but never held a title for a year, barely even 6 months. So I don't want that to be said of Swerve. I really do think a lot's going to depend on what happens with that company under Swerve's championship reign in these next 4 months. If they can look at considerable things that have shown growth, that have shown greater interaction, that have shown people really engaging with Swerve and things of that nature, then I think there could be a case for him, you know, getting past Ospreay in August. If not, then it's going to make the Ospreay move that much easier.
I think the smart money is on, if you had to place a bet, that Ospreay will win. But the correct thing to do, I think, is to let it play out. We need to see what kind of champion Swerve is over the next 4 months, what the company give him to do, and the company have to give him the best chance of success. You know, even Samoa Joe, we knew he was always going to be a transitional champion. We need to, not that Swerve needs to do what MJF did with the title, but he needs to be given that level of, you know, right, this is the ball, run sort of thing, like freedom or creative input into whatever he's going to do. He just needs to be given that kind of you know, allowance sort of thing. And then he can go into that match. And ideally, we're in a situation in August where it's like we've got like a super powerful, super crazy looking champion in Swerve and a crazy pretender in Ospreay, and it's like, all right, who's winning? And we don't know, sort of thing. That's the ideal situation, not any kind of foregone conclusion. But unfortunately, we know they've put a lot of money down to get Ospreay in, and they're trying to appease him with the kind of contract they've given him and stuff. And rightly so, he deserves it. But yeah, wrestling probably shouldn't be so cut and dry as to, okay, at this show you're going to be champion, at this show this is going to happen for you. Let's give everyone a chance, and then go from there.
It's going to be a very interesting couple of months, and the other thing for me that Dynasty did was showcase the level of talent that AEW actually has right now. It was ridiculous. I mean, we've mentioned Ospreay, Danielson, but the first match, Okada Pac,
right,
like, what,
right,
you know.
Right.
Even the trios match with House of Black, Adam Copeland, Eddie Kingston, you know, that whole thing as well. And it also kind of makes me kind of, you know, rub my hands a little bit in terms of what Swerve's reign could be like and the kind of people he's going to face or come up against. Pac, Takeshita could come back for him. You still got Hobbs, you know, there's so many people. It's crazy. So it's going to be interesting to see how it works out.
Side note, quickly, they should do at Wembley Osprey versus Pac.
That would be fire.
Yeah.
That would be fire.
That would be correct.
That would be fire.
That would be correct.
Which, if they do that, you almost then guarantee that Swerve makes it through All In as champion. You know, almost. But I have a thought that I don't think I've heard anybody mention yet regarding this title reign, which is also why it's important, but nobody's really talking about it. And that is this. If Swerve only goes, say, 4 months, 5, maybe 6 months tops as champion, and we look back and we say the chase was better than the reign, then we now have to start asking ourselves, what is so difficult about a black man as champion that it's not something that we can sink our teeth into? Because you can look at Kofi, you can look at Lashley, you can look at Big E, all of these guys who we were anxious to see as champion, and their championship reigns did not do the kind of thing that make us go, that's the man, that's the one in this company, that's the one who want to see as champion going forward. So I think this Swerve title reign is bigger than AEW right now. I think there's the opportunity to answer the question, can a black man actually hold this title, the world title, with in a way where we're all vested in? You know, even if we go back to Ron Simmons' title reign in 92, you know, nobody, I mean, we love the moment, but nobody looked at that title reign like, okay, when I think of world champions who had amazing title reigns, his name comes up. You know, in fact, some of the people that they ended up putting him against for title reigns were more so mid-card people. So there's a question that has to be answered, which will be how, if this title reign for Swerve does not do what we think it could do, we got to ask that question. And it's probably a painful question for some people to ask, but why is it that pro wrestling cannot seem to present an African-American man at the top of the business having extreme interest? Even if you look at The Rock didn't have a lengthy title reign. No. We love The Rock because he's charismatic, not because he was a world champion. So we got to ask that question, you know, what is so difficult in terms of having an African-American man as the world champion as something that we gravitate to?
I think the difficulty here is that while we ask that question, the guys at the top ain't asking that question.
Correct.
That's not their
thought process. But it's probably because we haven't forced them to ask it yet. Very true.
Very true. They're all about, you know, as we've heard so many times, and even with Vince back in the day, and it was kind of like this whole thing where, you know, wrestlers or the companies search for moments. So when someone becomes popular, you know, like Swerve has over the last few months and whatever else, they're searching for that undeniable moment. They probably haven't fought 6 months ahead. I'm sure they have, but at the same time, not necessarily in a way where it's like, okay, how do we present Swerve as this great guy? It was almost like, oh, we're gonna have to put the championship on him now because the people love him and he's over and da-da-da-da-da. It's not. Right, how do I make this guy look like one of the greatest ever of all time? And what they're thinking that about Will Ospreay.
Right.
Not Swerve.
And that is my question.
Exactly.
That is the question. And I think you nailed it. There's more of the moment. And it's crazy because when all of us look back, we all look at the moment.
Yeah,
we all talk about what we felt like at WrestleMania 35. You know, we talk about that Ron Simmons moment. We talk about, you know, these moments, even the Big E moment when he cashed in, right? We talk about that, but we don't talk about the reign. And because we don't, I don't think it puts it in the mindset of those who are helping to make these decisions. So you're right. Already Ospreay is being groomed to be the world champion. You know, and you can look back throughout all of the champions in AEW and you can tell they were groomed. You can tell they were groomed, but not for an African-American man to be champion. And that's not just an AEW thing. That is a pro wrestling thing right now. And the question is going to be, how can we raise the question to these major companies to force them to start thinking about more than the moment?
I think one way that we have to kind of look at it as well is that as we're entering that conversation, as a people, are we doing our bit though to prop up our black champions?
Right.
Because I've seen times when there are black shows on or black champions are visiting indie shows or whatever. And do the black people turn out to show that, you know, we're giving that additional support? If we already know with years of history, you know, the quote unquote white fan or the white people at the top of the card, at the top of the company, sorry, are not going to push our people. The one thing they do understand is money. It's the metrics.
Of course.
Like, so for now, we know AEW TV is at, you know, maybe one of their lowest periods. They're getting people into arenas when it comes to TV, when it comes like 1,500 to 3,000 people for venues that are, you know, relatively bigger than that. If Swerve can turn the tide and those numbers start going north of 3,000, 4,000, well, that's one way to show that he's a draw. He's getting people in. It may still not be the number they want, but it's better than, you know, we've entered this period and the golden goose in MJF was probably the person, if you want to say, responsible for dragging AEW into these times of low crowd. So we're at rock bottom now in that respect. If Swerve can kind of do enough to get more people into arenas, then that should show that, you know, that we care. And then, you know, like we say, in black fans, if this is really a problem for us, like obviously it's something we're talking about now, but is this a problem for us so much so that we're gonna part with our money and go into these stadiums and make noise for these people? Because otherwise, you know, we're not going to show anything different, and they will stick to the status quo and what they know and what has worked over X amount of years of professional wrestling.
I agree.
And sometimes you do get, you know, one or two exceptions. I think for me, especially with how WWE is at the moment, and very much NXT. Of course, we've seen Carmelo Hayes, you know, kind of being groomed into that number one spot in NXT. But my fear is that going to happen once he gets onto the main roster? Will that same thing kind of, you know, interpret the same way on the main roster? If I'm very honest and based on what I've seen so far and just a prediction, I don't see it happening, or it's going to take a while. But then at the same time, you've got the likes of Bianca Belair. Bianca has, you know, clearly been groomed to be where she is at, you know, over the last 3 or 4 years. And it's worked out for her. Then on the flip side of that, you've got the other thing where you've got a star like Jade Cargill who was doing the numbers in AEW, but what did they do with her? Nothing. Or definitely not enough. I wouldn't say nothing. It wasn't nothing, but definitely not enough in terms of numbers. So sometimes it's like, okay, so yes, it's a problem for us as black fans. The other problem still is, but then how do the board upstairs, you know, see these people? Because again, with a Jade, she was doing the numbers. She was getting those numbers on TV and all the rest of it for weeks upon weeks. Above, they groomed the guys like Adam Page and Bryan Danielson at the time. And then again, going back to Carmelo, he's been groomed to be that top guy in NXT, which is the third brand or the development brand. But then how does that translate once he gets to the big leagues? Is it going to be the same? And I don't think either of us can confidently say, oh, of course it will. We just don't know. It's still kind of like not too sure. Let's see what happens. So it's a very difficult thing to kind of find an answer or a solution to, because there's so many factors that kind of play a part that we have no real control over. And I don't think even if we were, you know, a lot more solid in our fandom of our fans and our support, that it would change much, because we're still dealing with guys who don't see things the way we do, have not experienced life the way we have, so they're not asking the same questions or have that same perspective.
But to that end, to much to what Mex's point is, you know, what we have to learn how to do is speak their language.
True.
And their language, and that's where, again, people have messed up. Part of their language, obviously, is what's happening on the socials, how loud we are there. The other part of that language is what we do with our money and what we do with our time and our appearance. Again, when you consider the fact that it was the outrage of people that ultimately put Cody Rhodes back into this main event at WrestleMania, it does speak to the fact that we are in an era where some companies are directly listening to what fans are saying. So the question is, well, first of all, it is back to the original question. Have we even thought far enough ahead to think that this is an issue? Or are we just satisfied as a people with, oh, we had a moment, great, as opposed to a movement, right? A movement that says, this is our champion and he's going to be our champion for long. We're the first ones. Go back to just Big E's title reign. We're the first ones to get mad at, oh man, he predicted that he was going to cash it in. He told everybody he was going to cash it in. He cashed in, great. But who did he actually beat? Like we did the same thing with Kofi. We cried at Kofi Mania. And 2 months in, we're like, but he's fighting Dolph Ziggler. And he's, so we have to do a better job. And it's not saying that we can't be honest or be fans of who we want to be fans of, but I think we do at some point have to see the bigger picture, which is, if we're going to create a space for a Carmelo Hayes, for a Trick Williams, for a Powerhouse Hobbs, for Ricky Starks, then we have to do well with who we have in those spaces now, which would mean a Swerve Strickland, which would mean a Bianca Belair, a Jade Cargill. I think when we do well with those and we show people, we're fully behind them. We are fully, and we're going to scream and we're going to holler and we're going to cheer and, we're going to rack up those TikTok views and all of the things. That's the language they speak. They don't speak protest. They don't speak marches on Washington. Like they don't speak that language right now. And we have to be galvanized and smart and not get into the weeds, and get divisive about things that others are not really talking about. When at this point, this is where we are. So I'm very interested, and which is why I think this conversation is important, because I haven't heard this conversation anywhere else talking about the length of title reigns. We're just happy that he won the title. If he loses it in 10 days, so be it, But no, we have to be able to scream louder about lengthy reigns so that, we're not running around talking about, well, he was an 8-time champion, but he held it a cumulative amount of 100 days. You know what I mean? So there's that.
Let me just read Del Boy, big up Graps with Guap. He's writing some good stuff in here.
Yeah, man.
I think the disparity is that a lot of our black champions aren't necessarily primed for being champion. They may have the look and tenure, but they've never been looked at as the guy. I think black wrestlers just need to be slotted in the position from the jump rather than being in the mid card for 15 years. And I don't think it's up to black fans, as we're the minority and we don't move the needle like that.
I'm going to disagree with that.
To see what we see.
I'm going to disagree with that. And here's why I'm going to disagree with that. What we are is influential. And I think you have to be able to acknowledge that black people in general, pick a field, we are going to influence the culture. We may not be the majority in terms of quantity, but we are the majority in terms of quality and influence. Think about this. Oh, boy. Was it white people that started the chant, "Whip that trick" for Trick Williams?
No.
Was it a white commentator that started? I had a conversation with somebody over the weekend. I won't say who, but they're in the wrestling business. And we got into the conversation about Trick Williams. And we talked about how Trick Williams is the direct result of a lot of people working together to make this work, right? So, for instance, a year ago, 2 years ago, Trick Williams is literally the sidekick for Carmelo Hayes. Nobody's thinking about him. Nobody's talking about him, right? Last year on this very show, Diamond Dallas Page was the first one to go, I think Trick Williams has next. And we all went, wow, that's interesting. So look at what happened, okay? Trick had a number of theme songs. Nobody thought about them. Trick did a couple of things in ring. Oh, that's cool. First thing they did was they changed his music. When they changed his music, we all went, whoa. And then there were black people in that Orlando audience who started chanting, whoop that trick. Because our Caucasian counterparts don't know anything about that. Let's just call a spade a spade. They don't know anything about that.
Beat his ass.
No, this is what they do. Go, Trick, go. Go, Trick, go. That's them, right? We're the ones talking about whoop that trick. Then you have to have Booker T on commentary.
Yep.
Booker T's adding the ad-libs. Oh, yeah, man. He's doing it rhythmically. You want to know the difference? Go get Wade Barrett. Okay? Wade Barrett. Shamon. Really? Right? None of it's working. We're all laughing. But when you put all of that together, Trick Williams is a star. What am I saying? You have to have all of it's influence. It's influence. What they do in that small area at the Performance Center has influenced the world. It's influenced the world. That's why when Trick Williams showed up on SmackDown randomly, and they all started chanting, whoop that trick, where'd they get that from? So I don't want us to ever downplay or diminish our influence. We have influence. We move the culture. We're the ones that always change slang. We change lingo. We influence all of those things. We're the ones they look to determine what's cool and what's not. So with that said, that's why we have to be the ones to lead the charge. Trust me when I tell you, nobody in WWE's corporate office is randomly talking about whoop that trick. Not without the influence of what has happened in Orlando by people that look like you and me.
For sure.
So I really want us to never forget that is our influence. That is our power. And if we use that same power like we've used with Trick, like we've used with Carmelo, like we've used with several others, we'll see that kind of change in a larger space.
And I think we are starting to see that, in the likes of a Trick Williams, Carmelo Hayes, Jade Cargill, what's happening with Bianca over the last couple of years. We're starting to see where the WWE or the powers that be, I guess, are looking at them and grooming them for bigger things, not just the momentary, oh, he's hot at the moment. It's more like you know what? Yeah, I'm going to make this person great. What they've done with Jade, you know what I mean? Just the last since she was signed, shows you all of that. And again, to kind of piggyback off the whole thing of us being an influence, as I said this last week, and we were getting excited about this last week of the possibility of Jade and Bianca becoming women's tag team champions and the different spaces that they'll be at. Who are the others that are transcending the wrestling business at the moment? Those two. Mercedes and Swerve.
Right.
Nothing else needs to be said, as well as Montez Ford. Nothing else needs to be. It's happening, but we definitely do have to make sure it continues by continuing to support and understanding that as much as we are the minority in number, we are definitely the majority in influence, and that's something I didn't even think about as I read the comment when Del Boy said it. I was like, yeah, you know what, we are the minority. We don't really move the needle. But after you saying what you're saying, Gerard, I'm like, actually, you know what? Yeah, something's happening, and we just need to make sure that we're on top of it, and continue it moving forward. Just to move the conversation forward just a little bit, there was another person who made a bit of history, and that being Willow Nightingale. Willow defeated Julia Hart at Dynasty to become the new TBS champion. Mex, right decision?
Yeah, it's almost long overdue. We spoke about this last year when we thought, Jade's run was running out of steam with the TBS title. We were calling since then, if Statlander wasn't going to come back anytime soon, Willow's your girl. Let Willow be the one to, take that title from Jade. They waited for it. They were doing other bits with Willow. Willow applied her time in Ring of Honor. Julia Hart, she had a good run to start off with. I think for the last maybe 4 or 5 months, she's actually been working with an injury. So I guess kudos to her in the last few months, doing what she needed to do to kind of get in this position to get overthrown by a Willow. But yeah, this is what is needed. It's good for Willow. We're developing that TBS scene, which is important. She's been, I guess, a cornerstone of it ever since Jade left. To be honest, she's been in and around that mix. It's just the question is now, is this a 1 month reign with Monet waiting around the corner?
Gerard, what are your thoughts on that? Obviously, Willow has beaten Julia. Mercedes already kind of set the challenge for whoever is the TBS champion come Double or Nothing, which happens in I think it's the 26th of May, is it?
Yes.
And we've got a change of title a month before. What does this mean for Willow?
I so desperately want Willow to get this win at Double or Nothing. But if there was one thing that held true with the booking decisions at Dynasty is that you could see them coming a mile away. You could see all of them coming a mile away. So I am concerned that this could very well be transitional. I don't think that's the right thing to do per se for this reason. I know Mercedes is the shiny new toy, but think about all that Willow has done for that company. I think this could have been avoided if they had put the title on Willow a year ago. If they put the title on Willow a year ago and Mercedes comes in now, we go, okay, this is cool. But Willow was top 10 on the PWI 250 this year. Top 10. She was number 8. So why do you wait so long to put this championship on her? That's kind of what's egregious to me. And then to potentially, you didn't even let her celebrate before Mercedes was in that ring. She didn't even get to the ramp to raise the title and get the fireworks up. She's standing in there, and then here comes Mercedes. And it's not a knock to Mercedes. It's just we could have done this all so much differently. So I guess it's probably good that we enjoy however long this reign for Willow is. I want it to be long. I think it'd be great money for Willow to beat Mercedes on Mercedes' first match out, but who loses their first match back? And I don't know that AEW is committed to that kind of storytelling. Somewhere else, perhaps, but I don't know that they're committed to that kind of storytelling. So I want this to be a solid reign for her, but I don't know.
And that's the thing. Here's the issue that you have is that, as you said, Mercedes is the shiny new toy. She's coming with the influence that she's had, and we talked about it. I think it was last week, if not the week before, that this whole thing with Mercedes has kind of dropped off a little bit, or hasn't really worked out as it maybe should have. She's coming. She's still injured. It's gonna be another 4 weeks now, even from now, before we see her in the ring. So it would be crazy for her to lose. It wouldn't help the whole purpose of her being an influence to the women's division and blah 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 if she loses. Now, for me, on a behind the scenes level, it would be amazing if Mercedes was to say, "Yep, I'm going to put Willow over." That would be phenomenal. But I think the general reaction of the fans would be the complete opposite. It'd be like, "Oh, what was the point in her coming then? Or what was she here for? Who does she think she is?" All that kind of negativity. So it's a very difficult place because I don't want to see Willow lose after, in her first real defense, and only have it for a month. What happens after that? Again, are we gonna get a champion or a future for Willow where she's a multiple time champion with few days as a champion? I don't get it.
I didn't like the fact of the interruption. I'm a genuine Willow fan, so I wanted to see her have that moment. Obviously, I think it's to actually facilitate a heel turn. Mercedes making stuff about her. I think that's solely what it was. Of course, I'm going to make this moment about me, and you start to turn that tide. So Mercedes isn't dumb. We are turning this into Sasha Banks versus Bailey. This is exactly what we're doing.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And
of course.
She's going to win the title, I reckon, just because of everything that you guys have mentioned already. She can't lose on her first outing and be calling herself the CEO. It doesn't add up. Injured or not injured or coming back from injury, it doesn't matter. She's going to triumph and win. But I think it's that kind of, you know, then get the belt on her, tell some stories of some of the women in that kind of TBS division. I think Willow will then beat her again for that title. That then pushes Mercedes up the card. It's just a question of, like we said with Swerve, almost when, I guess, if Willow does drop the title, what do you do with her in the interim to keep her hot, to keep her ready to go again for Mercedes Moné? That's just what they need to figure out. A 1 month reign isn't going to look good, no matter how you slice it, but they've got to tell the longer term story better if that's what they're going to do. And we're going to circle back around to Willow. Everything they do in the interim has to count. Like it absolutely has to count. I think we'll probably get something like a blood feud maybe between Statlander and Willow in the interim as well. Statlander may even be the person to cost her the title. But yeah, I think Willow has to come out of that looking super tough and then start climbing her way back up to Moné.
And then the thing as well is, you know, you mentioned that Willow could then beat Mercedes again and regain the championship, but then we get back into this whole thing with Mercedes of her not holding championships for long.
Correct. I was gonna say that, you know,
she can hold it for. I mean, what's long? What's long? And does she need to hold the TBS title?
Not the TBS. Not the TBS. No, not at all. Not at all. I guess I'm a little bit more thinking as a, dare I say, a fickle fan more than I am, you know, logical fan. It's kind of like that's the reaction that you're gonna get. Oh, she came here and she's only gonna be champion for, you know, 2 months, 3 months. That's short to most people.
Well, where has she ever been champion for a lengthy amount of time?
But that's
not New Japan, not WWE, like that's nowhere.
But that's what I'm saying. That's actually the problem. Not necessarily a thing where you can say, oh, you know, well, she hasn't been a champion long, so it doesn't matter. Like, that's going to be the issue. She hasn't been a champion long, so who does she think she is, calling herself the CEO and she's got to save the AEW women's division and all that kind of stuff? We already see the kind of haters that Mercedes has already. So it's honestly,
I know we mentioned this weeks ago when she first turned up. I still don't think it's too late to put her with the Bucks and Okada.
Not at all. Not at all.
I'm still very tempted because the CEO thing, and I yes, it's just a gimmick. I don't want to be doing too, you know, much mental gymnastics over it, sort of thing. But it's like, how does it make sense in a wrestling sphere?
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing on TV that's any different to what anyone else is doing, really, apart from dressing extravagantly on TV that's not pay-per-view? Like,
right.
I think these are who she should sit with, especially maybe once she turns heel, and maybe this run of hers will start catching some steam.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of the whole EVPs, CEOs, and the system, we saw Moose retain, and quite surprisingly, retain his TNA World Championship against Nick Nemeth, formerly known as Dolph Ziggler, at TNA Rebellion over the weekend. But then, of course, and I guess almost in true TNA fashion, he was attacked by a returning broken Matt Hardy. Gerard, what are your thoughts? Like, this is the second time now since Moose has been champion that he's been attacked by a newcomer or returning star at the end of a win to make some kind of impact, excused upon. But, you know, is this a problem, or is this kind of, is it a problem?
I don't think it's a problem. I think TNA is going to have to make sure that they don't introduce these people the same way every time. I do think that, because in Vegas at the same venue, the lights go out, like, you know, there's got to be a more creative way. But speaking of creative, I'm very glad that Matt Hardy is back in TNA for however long it is. Like, I'm not sure that he's signed a deal per se. I heard that he hasn't, but broken Matt Hardy was born in TNA and thrived in TNA. And even when they tried that in WWE and AEW, it never worked like it worked in TNA. So I don't know that Matt Hardy becomes world champion here. But I think it's a cool move. And if anything, ironically, as we've been talking about how we build Black world champions, this is one way you continue to build Moose.
True.
You give him Nick Nemeth, you give him Matt Hardy, you give him whoever else, and he has a significant reign at this point. Because I think we all thought, I know I did, that this weekend was it. Nick Nemeth was taking the title and, taking TNA on his shoulders. And so that not happening says that there is an investment in Moose. And I think, add them up, line them up, start bring, if you got to bring in all these old stars to boost his title reign, do that. I'm for it.
Mex, what are your thoughts when it comes to this whole thing with Moose? Obviously, as Gerard just said, it's clear that they've got an investment in him. They've got a vested interest in, bigging him up, making him the big star of TNA, making him Mr. TNA, as he used to call himself at one point. What are your thoughts on Moose as the TNA champion?
I thought it was super impressive that, they didn't just do, I guess, what was expected in flipping the title on to Ziggler. And I think Ziggler probably plays a part in that because he could probably pull rank if he thought that would be the right thing to do. So they're helping to build the current stars of the company and those that will probably be around for longer than they would. I think the issue, especially from what we know of TNA and the whole Scott D'Amore thing that's happened recent times, is that they now need to invest in those that they are building up. Like, wins on TV are important. Wins against big name, household name stars are also important. But then they need to be doing the other things around because, I tend to dip in and out of TNA when it comes to pay-per-views. I can't tell you the last time I watched a TNA, like a regular Thursday night TV show. So I need to kind of know, like, this is worth still watching and what's the direction of this. And, I think the run with Moose right now, I'm waiting to see kind of how it differs from previous runs. Like, what's going to be special about this one as him as champion. Gotta wait and see. But yeah, beating Dolph Ziggler, I think, is big. So big up to them.
It's massive, and of course, he's got Eddie Edwards and what's the other guy's name again? Well, I'm forgetting his name. Brian Myers, of course, and them two guys are the tag team champions as well. So the system actually hold all the belts right now, and their whole thing is no one beats the system. Right now, it's working perfectly. And for him to get that win when everybody, 90% of all fans would have been like, yeah, Nemeth's going away with this one. It's clear, it's obvious. From when he first came out and came face to face with Moose back in January, we all thought the same thing. The second they come in the ring together, Nemeth's taken that title, but it hasn't happened. And I think this also goes back to the conversations you had about Willow and Swerve. It's this whole thing of, yes, some of this stuff is going to be predictable, or it feels predictable. Oh, surely Will Ospreay is going to win. But if they make that brave decision for that person to lose, it's only good for that champion. So it's going to be interesting again to see what happens with Moose. We've mentioned this guy very already today, but let's just talk about him very quickly. Trick Williams has his next championship opportunity at Spring Breaking, not tonight, but next week.
It is tonight.
I believe.
No, it's tonight.
Is it tonight?
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow! I thought it would be the second week.
No,
okay.
It's tonight.
Interesting.
It's tonight.
Does Williams whoop that Trick?
Yeah, it's over for Dragunov. It's over for him because, I mean, we've obviously spoken about Trick and how high on him they are and what they see him in the company. It's almost too much, I would think. If he's to lose and the stipulation is he's to leave NXT or whatever, that means he's going to main roster. And I almost think that is a step too far in terms of we still need to kind of let him cook and, you know, establish him in some places and stuff like that within his repertoire. So the NXT Championship, I think, is like a harmless place for him to continue learning. He can be the champion. The brand loves him. The crowd loves him. Dragunov, his time is ready now. He can go up and be one of the fresh faces on the roster that can fit in like a glove, just ready to go sort of thing. So I think it's crazy we're kind of getting here on this just like a regular TV show that let's call it spring break and whatever, but if it's time, it's time. So I'm expecting Williams to become champion tonight.
What's interesting about this whole thing, we're talking about, you know, the possibility of Trick leaving NXT, or is it going to be Dragunov leaving NXT? And it was interesting that on Raw last night, that Giovanni Vinci was beaten down by Gunther, not Gunther, by Ludwig Kaiser yesterday. Dragunov, Gunther have history. You know, there could be either a rivalry or Dragunov joins Gunther instead of Giovanni.
That's the first thing I thought.
Wow.
I said it's Dragunov joining Imperium. That's the first thing I thought. I never thought it would even be a warring thing just yet. That's the first thing I thought, is Dragunov joining Imperium.
I would rather him join Imperium than have him versus Gunther. I would rather him join Imperium. That would be phenomenal.
I wouldn't. I mean, I'm not keen on him kicking out Vinci.
No,
but I think they've tried to make Vinci a star alone before in NXT 2.0. In the ring, the guy's fine. He's more than fine.
Phenomenal.
I think it's the character stuff. So maybe this is a second attempt. I hope I don't see like he's released or anything like that. But like, I would have just kept him as a tag team and then added Dragunov in there to maybe be the mid card guy as Gunther starts chasing down the top title.
Exactly that. Exactly that. You know, speaking and of course we saw as well last week with Dragunov, he put out this open challenge, and from the crowd he bounced onto the table, bounced onto the ring apron, and then bounced over Dragunov. We saw the young OG come and challenge Dragunov, and as star making performances go, this was like, for me, and every time I see any type of star making performance, the first match I think of every single time is Shelton Benjamin versus Shawn Michaels. Every single time. And I'm just like, this was very, very similar in that respect. Gerard, what are your thoughts? How did you feel? Because I know you're a fan of the young OG. How did you feel when you saw him kind of, make that step and face up against Dragunov?
It was amazing. I didn't expect it. I did not. I actually thought that Shinsuke was going to come back for like payback from, the Raw after Mania. That's what I thought. So to see Javon Evans show up, I was like, wow. And then I thought to myself, what a difference a week makes. The week before he was making his NXT debut, and now he's against the NXT champion. I think it said an awful lot about what they think about Javon Evans. Clearly, we've been talking, kind of the theme throughout the show has been building for the future, seeing things afar off. And it's very clear that NXT is already building their next crop of stars. You can kind of see that from Trick to Javon, like it's literally happening before our eyes. And so I think this was a major performance for him to show he can stand in there and he has great heart against the champion. And so there's a very, very bright future for Javon Evans. And I think by the time we're hitting September and NXT moves to the CW, I think we could be looking at him possibly as a candidate for North American champion.
For sure.
Let me see if I can throw this in here quickly. I said this on March 30th on Twitter. Let's see. Jay is only working Level Up and subsequently NXT for formalities. This brother should be at WrestleMania already.
Facts.
No,
Facts.
most definitely.
He's clear, man.
It's clear what, and we talk about him. He's 19 years old, and that sounds so young, but this man has been doing this thing for at least 5 years already. He turned pro 5 years ago. Like that, it's crazy. And the things he's achieved, his maturity in the ring, is
amazing,
ridiculous.
It's amazing.
It's ridiculous. You've got some of these guys who are at the Performance Center, part of the NIL program, or they've come from doing some experience doing independence, that are in their 20s and can't even nowhere near, don't know, have nowhere near the trust from the higher ups, from your Shawn Michaels and those guys, don't have the skill set or the maturity in the ring, still learning, and that's not a bad thing for them. That's not a bad thing for them at all. It just shows you just how amazing Javon Evans is. Facts. More than anything else. And
I think there's the real kind of, we haven't seen much of it yet, but I think there's a real kind of personable trait about him that people are taking to, because obviously the in-ring stuff is special, but we can see a lot of people that have in-ring ability, but there's just something about him that, again, it's the influence that Gerard speaks of. We start calling young OG, the whole crowd takes to it.
Right.
People are loving him, and he's had 2 televised matches.
Two.
Like, come on, like the energy's with him, and as we've said, they're moving the likes of a Carmelo Hayes along, a Dragunov along. There's gonna be some people that need to kind of anchor down this show. His name is firmly in the hat.
And we're talking about the influence and stuff, and I think the beauty of NXT, and it's only something that's come to my head now, because as I see NXT and they want to kind of bring it as the third brand again and try and build it up, and I've been saying they need to go to different places each week and but the beauty of NXT is the fact that it's there in front of the similar crowd every single week, because this level of backing and support that these stars get wouldn't happen if they're going to different shows each week. The reason why it feels as though Javon Evans is so over so quickly with only 2 televised shows is because he's had a few level up shows in front of these same people. So they've had the chance to see him so many times already. They know what he's about. They know what they're looking for and all the rest of it. So now when you get, the chance and, the whoop that trick, and when everyone's going, whoo, every time Obafemi speaks, like, that's because they're in front of the same people or the same, the same people every single week. And that's what's making the difference, I think, as well. It's a genius move for NXT.
It's a positive move, but at the same time, I'll say it's a bit of a gift and a curse.
Yes,
because I think this is what I also kind of attributed the downfall, partially the downfall of Black and Gold era, when we had that Full Sail crowd that were in front of every week, and people knew, like the wrestlers knew the names of some of those people in the crowd. And it gets to the point then when you go to a Barclays Center to do a takeover, and then that's the next step up, and then when you go to TV when they get called up, it's like, oh, we might not be getting that same reaction anymore.
True.
Sort of thing. So they've got the loyal 200-300 in the arena, which is important, especially at that level of where they're growing and stuff. But I guess the message is, don't get lost in the sauce and think that is representative of the entire WWE universe.
Very true.
The other side of that is, I think that much like the Black and Gold era, which is why Black and Gold, one of the reasons why Black and Gold worked. I think the downfall to Black and Gold was the pandemic and those fans not being there. And so those people not knowing how to work like that. But with that said, I feel like part of the job of this NXT crowd is they teach the rest of the country and the rest of the world how to respond to these people. They totally do. And so I think therein lies the win. Now, there are some things that are carrying over and some things that aren't. Like, for instance, I miss the fact that nobody's singing the Legato theme song when Legado del Fantasma comes out. Like, somebody should be singing Legado. Somebody sing something.
Sure.
But they haven't picked that up. So my hope is that in this phase, those kinds of things will transfer as these stars move to wherever they're moving to next. If there's anything, because I was thinking as we were talking about the Trick Williams situation, some of the most popular stars right now in WWE are the stars where by the time you have their theme song on, they're already engaged. Jey Uso, Cody Rhodes, Seth Rollins. I mean, everybody screams for the whoa, and everybody wants to yeet, and everybody wants to do all of that. You know what I mean? That's all part of the experience. And so I think, again, this is where the crowd at the Performance Center gets to teach the rest of the world. That's how at WrestleMania they knew, to do all of that stuff for Obafemi and for Trick and for. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how these new stars, get whatever this thing is going to be that's going to be attached to them. True.
There's so much more we can say. I was going to ask a question. I'm not going to ask it now. But or should I say, I'm going to ask it, but don't answer it. The possibility of Trick losing tonight and actually moving to the main roster. Anyway, let's not, because I want to hear if I hear whoop that Trick on SmackDown or a Raw, it's going off. Like,
it's going to go crazy.
Jey Uso is going to have a competitor. Like,
he's going to run for his money.
It's that serious. It would be that serious, but maybe way too early in terms of career for Trick Williams. Anyway, with all of that said, this is the end of our show. You have been watching WrstlXtra on the WrestleManiac UK YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see when this guy Mex puts out all his reactions to WWE, AEW, everything else in between. You can also find Mex on the Wrestling's podcast on the Wrestling YouTube channel. And see all the content and weekly content put out by the man them. You can find Mex on Twitter, on X, and on Instagram, WrestleManiac UK. You can also find this guy. On Gorilla Position as well, of course. You can find the other guy to the side of me, Gerard Bonner, on all things Bonafide. His own show, The Faction Show. You can see him also on WWT Live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday as well. And also, you can see him doing his commentary broadcasting for the Nightmare Factory, IWE, Arshay Wrestling. Check out the latest show.
Crazy show.
Crazy
show.
All Caribbean Wrestling. Very crazy. All Caribbean Wrestling, Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling, and of course, Southern Honor Wrestling as well. You can find me, A Dazzle, on Instagram, Black Wrestling Alliance, and BWA Dazzle on X. My mouth is dry. I've been talking too much. I gotta go. Until next time, guys.
One more quick thing.
Oh, go.
Happy day 500 for Athena and her Ring of Honor World Title reign. 500 days. All that talk we've been doing throughout the show. There's a champion, obviously, that you're connected to.
Yeah, and guys, check out my page on Instagram. Very soon, you'll see all the good stuff connected to all of that as well. Until we eat again. See you later.